People believed that Larry and Lori Isenberg's marriage was perfect. However, one of them was hiding a sinister secret that would eventually result in the murder of their companion. Larry Isenberg, a native of the area, was born in 1950. After completing his forestry degree from the University of Idaho, he began working in the forestry sector. In 1974, Larry wed his first wife, with whom he had 2 children, Dean and Jessica. The couple would eventually divorce after their children had grown up. Lori Barnes was born in 1953. Her family occasionally camped out in abandoned farms throughout her early life, which was characterized by poverty. She wed her first husband, Stephen Barnes, when she was 19 years old, and together, they had 6 children before splitting up in 1996. Following that, she moved to Coeur d'Alene to raise her girls alone. Lori Barnes and Larry Isenberg were engaged in 2004 after meeting in Coeur d'Alene. By 2009, the Isenbergs were well known in the area, and they actively worked to support the locals. Larry was retired, but remained involved with a number of community organizations. On the other hand, Lori was the executive director of the North Idaho Housing Coalition. Lori called 911 at around 10:30 on February 13, 2018. She claimed that her husband Larry had fallen into Lake Coeur d'Alene.
911, what's the address to your emergency?
I need help. I'm on the lake.
I'm sorry, I can't understand you. What's the address?
I'm on the lake, but I don't know where. My husband he had a stroke and he fell over.
Are you out in a boat?
Yeah.
Is he awake?
No, he's
Okay.
in the water.
He's in the water?
He's gone. I've been looking for him for hours.
Within minutes, the sheriff's deputies arrived on the scene and found Lori alone on the Isenbergs' boat. The rescue team spread out around the lake, but they feared Larry had already died. The water that day was about 38 degrees, and at that temperature, one is either going to drown or die of hypothermia. Lori provided an official statement once she was back on shore.
He was driving the boat, and he stood up fast, and he said that something's wrong with the motor. And so then he unzipped the cover thing and went to the front of the boat. He turned towards me to say something about the electric motor, and he and he fell over.
Lori said that she and Larry decided to take a morning sail before having breakfast at a nearby restaurant. Their boat then developed an issue, and as Larry was inspecting it, he had a stroke and fell over. Lori asserted that she drove around for an hour, searching for her husband in the cold sea before the boat's motor went out. 2 hours would pass before she called 911, and she explained this by claiming to have left her phone on shore. She also mentioned that it took her some time to find Larry's phone inside the boat. That same day, local news outlets reported that Lori was no longer an employee of the North Idaho Housing Coalition. The company had requested an internal audit, which showed that Lori had stolen more than $500,000 from the company over the previous years. She had used her position, which had limited oversight, to submit phony invoices from companies registered under her daughter's names. Lori was arrested on February 27, 2018, and charged with 40 charges of forgery and 1 act of grand theft. 2 weeks later, the body of her 68-year-old husband was discovered floating in Sunup Bay, close to Worley, Idaho. A $500,000 warrant was issued for Lori's arrest in May 2018, after she skipped 2 court appearances connected to her fraud case. Lori was on the run and being sought by bounty hunters. At the same time, the Kootenai County Coroner's Office released Larry's autopsy results. It was discovered that he had taken too much antihistamine Benadryl and had died from diphenhydramine overdose. Even at standard dosages of diphenhydramine, which are commonly between 100 and 1,000 nanograms, users experience drowsiness. When Larry passed away, a startling 7,100 nanograms of diphenhydramine were discovered in his body. That essentially launched a full-fledged homicide investigation into the case. After evading capture for a month, Lori gave herself in. Online searches for water depths, drownings, boat rentals, and boating accidents were discovered on Lori's computer. Investigators also discovered that she had made handwritten changes to Larry's will. The changes left only 20% of Larry's assets to his 2 children and gave 80% of his estate to Lori's 6 daughters. It was also discovered that on February 13, 2018, the day after Larry passed away, Lori had emailed the North Idaho Housing Coalition, promising them to pay all the money as soon as she sold her house. Lori pleaded guilty to 3 charges of wire fraud and 1 count of theft. In January 2020, she received a 5-year prison term and was required to pay a $20,000 fine. Her daughters were sentenced to a combination of house detention and probation, as well as more than $50,000 in fines. After pleading guilty to federal theft charges, Lori was formally charged with first-degree murder in connection to her husband's death.
Larry used to hate it when people said, "I'm sorry." He said, instead of saying, "I'm sorry," live your life in a way where you don't have to say, "I'm sorry." But that's all I can say, even though it's wholly inadequate. All I can say is, I'm so sorry.
Lori entered an Alford plea to second-degree murder a year later in February 2021. She claimed that she had made a poisoned drink for herself the morning of her husband's murder, but Larry accidentally drank it when she was dozing on the boat. Her judge was unconvinced and gave the 67-year-old Lori a life sentence with a fixed term of 30 years.